Are you ready?
Now, I am by no means a model for physical fitness in life. Please keep your amens to yourself, as I know the truth. But that being said, I am pretty conscious about what I eat. I try to eat healthy. I exercise pretty regularly. And believe it or not, I have actually struggled with my weight for most of my life. It was about 5 years ago or so that a gentleman named Marcus in our church back in Ontario started a ministry in our church called Forever Fit. It was a program or a ministry engaged to help people discover how to live healthier lifestyles. You know, let's just face it, here in North America, we don't necessarily all have the best eating habits, and most people don't exercise on a regular basis. And what Marcos was trying to do was, through his own experience, share how people can live a healthier lifestyle and be better stewards with the body that God has given us. It was an interesting season in the time of my life. I was actually tipping the scales at about 20 to 25 pounds heavier than I am now, which was the heaviest I'd ever been in my life. At least I think it was. And it was the first time in my life, as I was going through that program, that I began to learn how what I put in my body affected my body. How the different kinds of foods that I ate and how I exercised affected my physical fitness, my health, and specifically my weight. And incidentally, over the course of about a 6-month time period of making some of these lifestyle changes, I was able to lose over 30 pounds in a 6-month time period. And today, I still practice most of the things that I learned as I went through that program. Incidentally, I'm healthier today as a guy in my mid-40s than I was 20 years ago in my mid-20s. And most of that is directly related to the fact that I've learned how to manage what I eat, and I've learned how what I put in my body affects my body. Now, if you're a fan of the UFC and of mixed martial arts, you're probably aware that the physical fitness of a fighter is a very, very important part of their journey in being a successful fighter. Not only are they learning and preparing their skill set, learning different martial arts and learning different techniques to use in the octagon, but they're also learning how to train their body, how to eat healthy. They're really conscious about what they put into their bodies. It's really important. In fact, one of the most important aspects of a fighter's career is the ability to make weight. On the day before a fight, two fighters who are scheduled to fight one another have a weigh-in. It's usually a big media event. They come together, they get on a scale, and when they step on that scale, they have to have met a predetermined weight range in order for the fight to take place. If the fighter comes in and they are overweight, if they don't meet their weight, then part of their prize money actually goes to their opponent. They actually will lose some of their money. Or in the case that they're too overweight, the fight is actually canceled altogether. So you can see it's a very important thing for a fighter to be self-disciplined and knowledgeable when it comes to how they're preparing their body for their fight. We're going to show a little video for you here in just a moment. This is a video of Johnny Big Rig Hendricks, who happens to be a UFC champion. He was visiting Fellowship Church in Grapevine, Texas, and this is an interview of him with the pastor of that church, Pastor Ed Young Jr.
You weigh right now how much?
205.
205, and you fight at what?
170.
Is that ridiculous? I mean, the guy has probably 3% body fat, and you have to drink, you were telling me, some serious water, and you watch your diet. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, my diet's very strict. Probably more strict than anybody in here can
Yes, I would
imagine.
Believe that. Yes.
Every day I got to wake up, I got to eat organic. Everything's organic, so organic oatmeal with organic berries and strawberries, and with a little touch of honey. That's my breakfast. Then I got to drink 32 ounces and a 1 cup of diet tea with 0 calories, 0 sugar, and all that stuff. Then I got to drink 1 8-ounce cup of orange juice. That's for breakfast. Now lunch, I need to eat 3 eggs, organic, with 2 handfuls of spinach, with asparagus, chopped onions, chopped peppers, and stuff like that. You throw it in there. Then I got to have another 32-ounce water and a glass of tea. Yeah,
how about your Big Mac?
I wish
Whataburger.
Big Mac is after the fight.
Okay, okay.
I love McDonald's. I love Taco Bell, and so I'm just like everybody else. And I gotta. That's what I gotta fight more than anything is, even from here to there. I think there's like 6 McDonald's you pass from where I live. You know what I mean? And that's the battles that I have to fight internally. For me, it's not everything else. It's the food, The food, man. I love to eat.
Yes.
That's why I'm 205.
Johnny, that's amazing, though, that you're able to drop that weight and make weight. And then you're saying, though, right before the fight, though, after you make the weight, you gain even a little bit more.
Yes. So I make 170 on Friday. Then on Saturday when I fight, I'll probably weigh around 190 to 195. So I go to bed around 200. So I weigh 170 at 4:30ish. At 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning when I go to bed, I weigh about 200.
Whoa. It's so interesting, isn't it? I've never thought about that.
It's little tweaks, little things that make you better.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not, everybody thinks it's the big things, right? It's the little things. It's the little things that you pick from here, you pick from here.
That's well said.
And that's what gets you to the next level.
There's no mystery in the fact that what we put into our bodies directly affects the performance of our body, right? What you eat, what you ingest, plays a big part in your physical health. And when I hear about these fighters, guys like Johnny Hendricks, and I see the discipline and the intentionality that they go through in order to make sure that they're prepared for the fight that they're going to face. It's going to last anywhere from 10 seconds to 25 minutes if it's a championship fight. It's remarkable to me how much work they put into it. They have to be hyper conscious. They have to know every little detail about what they're ingesting and how that's going to affect their weight and how that's going to affect their energy. Johnny Hendricks, before a fight, he's got a clear target. He knows what the date is going to be that he's going to fight, and he knows what weight he has to be at. And there's nothing that's going to stop him, no lack of self-discipline, that's going to stop him from meeting the weight on the date that he's got to meet the weight so that he's prepared to fight. And, I started thinking about this. If a fighter in the UFC is really that meticulous about the way that they prepare themselves for a fight, should we not also be as meticulous in the way that we prepare ourselves to fight the most important fight that we will ever face in our lives? And that's the fight for our family. We differentiated last week between fighting with your family and fighting for your family. Fighting for your family is the most important fight that you will ever engage in. And I think about how these guys that compete in this sport are so meticulous and so self-disciplined about the way they prepare themselves that we too, as we prepare to fight for our families, which can be a life and death kind of fight sometimes, that we are just as meticulous, just as disciplined in our preparation. Of course, we're not talking about physical preparation. We're talking about emotional preparation and spiritual preparation. We need to be prepared to engage in the fight. And so we need to ensure that we've taken steps to be healthy and we're ready to go when the bell sounds. Now, God has a very interesting history with humanity. It's very colorful. In fact, if you read through the Old Testament of the Bible, you'll see that God, much like many of our family relationships, has a very complicated relationship with the people that he's chosen to be his children, the nation of Israel. They are his people. And as we read through the Old Testament of the Bible, it reads very dramatically and very colorfully about the way that Israel and God work their relationship with one another, or how they often fail to work their relationship with one another. We see countless times that the people of Israel have rejected God's love and God's affection. They've gone and sought affection and love and fulfillment and satisfaction from other things. And there's actually, in the book of Jeremiah, an incident that God brings up where the people of Israel have once again begun looking for satisfaction and fulfillment and hope and joy and happiness in all kinds of things that their culture offers that have nothing to do with God. And so speaking through the prophet Jeremiah, this is what God says. My people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. What God's essentially saying here is that the people have chosen to try to fill themselves with something that's not him. They've forsaken him. They've turned their back on him. They're looking to have their hope and their happiness and there's this sense of fulfillment to come from things that the world is offering them. And God is saying, look, I'm the source of the living water. Jesus tells us in the New Testament that living water is the kind of water that when you drink, you never go thirsty again. Add to the fact that God is saying that these tanks, these cisterns that they're pouring all this stuff into, they've built them themselves. They're imperfect, they're fragile, they're broken, and they're leaky. And since they leak, they're perpetually empty. And so it doesn't matter how much stuff they try to keep pouring into these tanks, into these cisterns, that they perpetually leak out. And so the people are felt perpetually vacant and empty and just keep trying to put more and more stuff in it. When we think about that, think about the parallel between where the nation of Israel was in their relationship with God thousands of years ago and our culture today. Is it not eerily similar? That we live in a world where people are constantly pursuing their fulfillment, their hope, and their joy from things that the world offers us. But really, what we're mostly missing is that thing that only God can fill that void, right? God is the answer. God doesn't just have the answer, he is the answer. He provides the living water, which when we drink of it, we never go thirsty again. Now, not only do these cisterns that the people 3,000, 4,000 years ago were filling leak, our cisterns leak as well, which is why we keep filling ourselves with more and more stuff and going to greater and greater extremes to try to find things that fill those voids and give us that fulfillment and make us happier. But these cisterns are leaky, and when they leak into our lives, and they leak messy stuff. Creates a mess when things leak. You ever watered a plant in your living room only to discover later that the pot that it was in had a crack in it? Or the proverbial Christmas tree stand leak. Anyone ever had one of those? And after you take all the gifts away and you move the tree and you realize for a month you've been leaking sap and water and gook into your carpet and that stain is there forever? When we fill those cisterns with messy, icky stuff and that leaks out into our lives, it creates an even greater mess. If it's not God, the living water that we are filling our tanks with, we've got to ask ourselves the question, well, what are we consuming? What are we filling our lives with? And what's leaking back into our relationships? I read a tweet from a pastor, one of our sister churches down in the U.S. a couple of weeks ago. His name's Jeremy Bing, and this is what he tweeted. What entertains you trains you. What fills your head floods your heart. When I read that statement, that tweet, I started thinking about this passage from Jeremiah and the idea of these leaky cisterns. You know, I started thinking about how all this stuff that we consume leaks back into our lives and how that stuff affects our relationships. And of course, Jeremy's tweet directly calls out the stuff that we use to entertain ourselves. Videos, TV, movies, books we read, magazines, video games, social media. That which entertains us trains us. What fills our heads floods our hearts. What floods our hearts overflows into our relationships. And so we have to ask the question, well, what's overflowing out of my life? And what's overflowing into my relationships? Now, this item here is not likely to make it onto the menu plan of any mixed martial arts fighter, especially when they're in training. Agreed? Probably not going to. In fact, I read an interview with one of my favorite UFC fighters, Uriah Faber, this past week about his diet. He promotes a diet called Eat Like a Champ. And in the interview, Uriah Faber, who's I think 34 years old, stated that he's tasted pop a couple of times. And then he went on to say, okay, that's not entirely true. I think I've had a couple of root beers. But the essential idea was in 34 years of his life, because was a wrestler before he was a mixed martial arts fighter, because he's always been in training for the fight, he's just never had pop. It's not part of his regular diet. Now, I don't drink pop very often, but when I do, this is the one. Sugary, sweet, amazing, nectary goodness. Hails from the state of Texas, just in case you didn't know that. All right, that is good stuff. Now, it's only good stuff when it's occasional good stuff, right? Sometimes it's just what the doctor ordered. Sometimes. But it can't be all that the doctor ordered, right? This can't be what I resort to quench my thirst every time I'm thirsty. Every time I need fluids. Every time I need to rehydrate. This can't be what I choose as my primary source of fulfillment, can it? Because, well, not only if I drank this as often as I was thirsty, I'd have some serious health issues, right? I'd probably be a diabetic, probably have high blood pressure, probably have some weight challenges as well, which would only compound the problems with my diabetes and my heart issues. But not only that, it's so full of sugar and sodium that no matter how much I drank, I'd never be fully satisfied. I'd always need more. I'd always need to keep on drinking, keep on consuming. Because even though it gives a momentary satisfaction, it's not what my body needs. It's not what my body longs for. Now, this, on the other hand, that's some good stuff too, right? This is what my body is really longing for when I fill it with this. Make sure the label's out there so we can all see that, right? I picked Pure Life here. I thought that was fairly ironic. And I'm not endorsing this brand. I will endorse this brand, but water's water as far as I'm concerned. But let's think about that for a minute. This is what I'm made for. This is what I'm made of. Think about that. Our bodies are made of this, and so it's only natural that when we have this thirst that needs to be quenched, that this is what we're consuming. In Matthew chapter 12, Jesus says, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. That means that the stuff that fills our heads and floods our hearts eventually comes out right here. Think about that for a second. Now, if I were to take this bottle and I were to pour it into this cup and I pour it until it overflowed, we would have a sticky, icky mess. Not that you'd notice so much on this floor here, but transport yourself to your living room for just a moment, okay? We're talking about our family lives and our relationships. So mentally transport yourself to your living room, your family room, your kitchen, somewhere in your home. And imagine that this is the kind of stuff that's overflowing in your life and in your relationships. It's going to create a mess, right? Because it's icky and it's sticky and it's yucky. But this, when this overflows, this is something that everybody needs. This is something that it's cleansing, it's purifying, it's refreshing. This can take the stains out that this may leave. This has a potential of putting out fires, right? Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him. And the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him. I'm sorry, my friend, but you are evil. You have to go over there, and I'm going to bring this guy over here because this is what I need. This is what I want. This is what I want overflowing in my life. Whatever entertains you, trains you. What fills your head, floods your heart. You know, I'm not a car guy. I don't know that much about cars, but I've seen enough Pennzoil commercials to know what you put in the engine directly affects the performance of the engine. You car guys out there, you with me on that? right? I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not an expert in the body and how it all works. But I do know that what I consume, what I put in my body, directly affects the performance of my body. When we consume with our mind entertainment, the things that entertain us, it plays a big part in how our mind works. It shapes the way that we see reality. It shapes the way that we view relationships in different situations and different circumstances. There have been countless studies done on how our media today and what we absorb as our entertainment, how it shapes our worldview and how it shapes our perspective and how it affects the way that we manage relationships. You know, I'm not here to tell you today that television and movies are all evil, that rock music is all from the devil. We're not going to start a fire and start burning our video games and books and magazines and cell phones. Although some of you might want to consider burning your cell phones, just saying. Like, I'm not likely to tell you those things any more than I'm going to tell you I'm going to give up this permanently. It's evil, but I'm probably not going to give it up permanently. There's a time. Just like Johnny Hendricks said, there's a time for McDonald's after the fight, when the training is done. There's a time for the fight, the time for the Dr. Pepper. No time like now. Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, Paul writes, "Fix your thoughts on what's true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise." When we begin to evaluate what we consume with our minds, and we start running it through that filter, is it true? Is it honorable? Is it right and pure? Is it worthy of praise? That gives us some hard things that we need to start filtering out. Are we consuming things that are pure and noble? Are we consuming things that when they overflow are going to create a mess? And this is our challenge, is that we have to start figuring out as we look at our lives and we look at what we're filling our minds with, what we're entertaining ourselves with, we need to evaluate how much of this I need to start replacing with this. Because at the end of the day, the fulfillment, the hope, the joy, the satisfaction that I'm looking for in life needs to come from the living water. It needs to come from the source, our Creator, God, the relationship that He wants to have with us. We've got to start looking at the stuff that we feed our minds with and start filtering it through true and noble and honorable and right and pure and worthy of praise. Now, I'm going to speak for a minute to those of you who are parents. Some of you are still in the phase of having babies. We have 2 4-month-olds down here this morning, right? And then some more of you with babies. When you bring that newborn home, fresh out of the oven, come home, you're going to do everything that you can to make sure that that baby is getting all the nutrition that they need, right? Whether you're a nursing mom or you're feeding formula with a bottle, you're going to do everything that you can to ensure that that baby is getting all the nutrition they need. They're fulfilled by what they're eating, drinking, and you're not going to allow them to consume things that would be unhealthy for them. It wouldn't be wise, wouldn't be smart. You love your baby. You want to see your baby grow and develop and be healthy. Now, eventually that baby starts to grow some teeth, and then you're going to start to wean them off the bottle or off the nursing, and you're going to start introducing solid foods, right? We're going to introduce things like Cheerios. Isn't that always fun? The first time you give your little kid Cheerios, and they're gumming them there, right? You have time the Cheerios, make a mess all over the floor, but it's cute the first couple of times. You give them a carrot stick, they gnaw on the carrot stick because they got those teeth in there, and it's sweet, and it's orange, and it's fun, right? But there's a reason when you start introducing solid food that you introduce things like Cheerios and carrot sticks and not candy corn and coffee crisp, right? And it has nothing to do with the fact that you're saving the coffee crisps for yourself. It has everything to do with the fact that as your child is developing and growing, you want your baby to be healthy. And so you make choices to fill their body with things that are going to help them grow and help them be healthy. And you're going to avoid things that might stunt their growth or make them sick. So if we're so meticulous as parents about what we feed our children, what they ingest into their bodies, and we're so concerned with their physical development, why do we have a tendency in our culture today to be so cavalier, to be so lazy about what we allow them to feed their minds? Isn't their character development just as important as their body's physical development? Personally, I'd trade kids that have awesome character with physical ailments over a kid who has poor character and the healthiest body in town. It's one of my kids. Okay? What entertains your child trains your child. What fills their head floods their heart. If you don't believe that that statement is true, plop them down in front of SpongeBob for a couple of hours and then start watching what comes out. Children don't overflow, they spew it. It just comes flying out, right? It was really cute when your toddler was watching Bob the Builder, right? When they were little, or Dora the Explorer. Silas used to go around all the time going, "Can we fix it? Yes, we can," right? Your little girl's out there going, "Backpack, backpack, swiper, no swiping," right? That's really cute. But then when your 8 or your 9-year-old is running around the house talking to you like Stewie from Family Guy, it's not cute anymore, is it? It's insolent. It's belligerent. It's rude. You look at them and you go, "Where did you come from? I didn't train you to do that." No, you didn't. But what's entertaining them is training them to talk to you that way. Because what fills their head floods their heart. What floods their heart overflows into their lives. It spews out of their mouths. We've got to be so much more careful. We've got to be label readers. I have a friend named Paul. Paul has one allergy. He's allergic to mustard. Weirdest thing, right? I think all these people have all these crazy allergies. He's allergic to mustard. So years ago, found out that Paul was allergic to mustard, and so my buddies and I thought, well, we'll prank him. We'll give him some mustard, see what happens, right? Before we did, I asked him the question, "Hey, Paul, what would happen if you ate mustard?" "My throat would close up and I would die." Okay, prank's off. We won't go down that road. But Paul was the most avid label reader of food I've ever met in my entire life. His life depended on it. So any prepackaged food that he ate, he read to make sure that there was no mustard in the ingredients. If the ingredients said, "and other seasonings" or "and other spices," he stayed away from that too, because there was a chance that there could be mustard in it, right? It was a life or death prospect for Paul to consume mustard. There's so much stuff out there that our kids feed on. And we as parents have got to be better label readers about what we're allowing them to entertain them. We've got to know the contents of the package of what they're consuming with their minds. Some of it can kill their character. It's just as destructive as if Paul ate mustard. They can die. It'll kill them. Sometimes it's a slow death, but it can. There was a movie that came out this summer. It was a movie in a long string of superhero movies that have been coming out for the last couple of years. I'm not going to name the movie by name. It did look as though it was a family movie. It was promoted that way as a family movie. It had a cute raccoon in it. Aren't all movies with cute raccoons family movies? Okay, so some of you know what movie I'm talking about. Some of you have actually seen the movie. Well, my kids came home and said, "Dad, we want to see this movie. All our friends are going to see this movie. Can we go see this movie?" And like I said, it looked like a lot of the other movies that we'd recently seen. And what I always do when my kids ask about a certain movie or video game or CD or video, whatever, I go onto a website or an app called Common Sense Media. There's a whole little section called What Parents Need to Know. And I screen it. I look at what it says, and it gives me all the details that I could find in the movie. It tells me all about the sexual content, the imitative behavior, the violence, anything that might be in the movie. Now, there's a screenshot of it right there. Let's go to the next screen. This is the new movie, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. And I just want you to take a quick look here. This is the kind of detail that it provides you. If you looked at the words that are included in this movie, you would see that we have words like boobs and penis and butt thong in this movie. Now, I read this book about 10 times when I was 7 years old. And if I was a non-label reading parent, I might think, "Oh, it's Alexander and the Very Good, Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Bad Day. I'm going to go take my kids to see it because I read the book so many times when I was a kid." I assure you, in not one version of that book that I ever read, did I ever read the words boobs, penis, and butt thong. Wasn't there. So if I take my kids to this movie expecting it to be like the book that I read when I was a kid, let's go ahead and get that off the screen. That's very distracting, isn't it? I'm going to go on a limb and say that's probably the very first time in the history of humanity that the word butt thong has been used in a sermon. Please don't tweet that, okay? All right, but seriously, if you think it's going to be one thing and you go without reading the label, without knowing, and I'm telling you, this website gives you all the details, everything you need to know. Now, I'll go back to my story. My boys said, can we go see this movie? And I said, well, I'm going to go online. I'll check it out. So I went and read it. And the language in the movie crossed a threshold for me. It wasn't something that I was comfortable doing. And so I told them, I said, guys, I reviewed it, I screened it. I don't think that it's something that I'm comfortable with. You know, it's not that we don't go to movies with some bad words in them. Sometimes we do. But I need to see if it's an overarching theme in the movie or if it's just an isolated incident. In this particular movie, based on what I was reading, I felt it went too far for me and what I was comfortable with. So I said, no, we're going to pass on the movie. Now, sometimes when there's something questionable in the film, I'll talk to the boys about it before. I'll say, hey, you know what, guys? There's going to be a character in this movie that does these things or says some of these things. There's going to be something that we're going to see in here that isn't what we ought to be doing. It's not pleasing to God, and it's not healthy. And then after the movie, we'll talk about it afterwards, and we'll say, hey, you know when that character did that, or when those people were saying those things, it wasn't right, was it? No, that wasn't something that would please God. I want you to think, boys, about how, if we talk that way in our home, how would that affect our relationships? And so we have a good discussion and a good dialogue about it. Everybody has to sort of set what their own boundaries are, but you've got to make sure that you actually have some, that you're reading the label, that you know what's in it. So incidentally, the friend of mine who also happens to be a follower of Jesus, a week or two later went to take his kids to see that movie. That night, he posted on Facebook, took my kids to see the movie. Really awesome movie, but wow, I was really shocked by all the language in it. I'm not a Facebook fighter, but I wanted to grab the guy by the shoulders and say, shocked? It's your responsibility to know. How can you be shocked? How can you take your kids to go see a movie and you don't even know what's in it? It doesn't make any sense to me. You're the parent. You're responsible. Not only did you let them feed on it, but you fed it to them by taking them to see the movie. Parents, it's your responsibility to read the labels. It's your responsibility to protect your children's purity, their innocence, to guard their hearts and to guide their lives. They can't do it for themselves. You've got to do it. There's a verse in the book of Psalm. We heard a little bit of this morning. It says, children are a gift from the Lord. They are a reward from him. Children born to a young man are like arrows in a warrior's hands. An arrow in a warrior's hand is a great responsibility. It's a great weapon. It can do a lot of damage. Now, there are a few things that you need to know about the way a warrior, a good warrior, wields that arrow. For starters, that arrow has to be aimed at the right target in order to do what it was designed to do. Your children have one bullseye, one target, and that's Jesus Christ. A relationship with God through Jesus. That's the target. If you're wielding that arrow at any other target, you're offline. You're off target. Your stewardship responsibility with your kids is to aim them at the right target. There are a few things that you need to consider as you do that. For starters, you've got to realize that you establish for them the sun that their world orbits around by the way you manage your time and the way you manage your family. So we have an opportunity to establish a lot of priorities for ourselves. We're so privileged here in North America. There are 1,000 different activities and things that we can plug our kids into. But the stuff that we plug our kids into, when we start prioritizing that stuff, we're telling them what the most important thing is in their lives. So when we tell them that, hey, we're going to sign you up for this activity, and it's a sport, or it's a Girl Guides, or it's a music or arts thing, and because of that activity, we're not going to attend church for the next 4 months, or we're not going to be able to be in a community group this half of the year because, well, we've got this event on this night, and this event on this night, and this event on this night. What do you think you're telling your kids that the planet is, the sun is that they need to orbit? Are you affirming for them that their orbit is Jesus? If you're saying that all this other stuff takes priority over our relationship with the church and our personal growth in our relationship with God, then you're telling them that those things are more important than that too. You have a better chance of your child hitting the target if you prioritize for them what that target should be. It's not to say that there aren't seasons in our lives when we miss church a while or we can't be engaged in a community group. But you know what? If that becomes the norm, you can't expect your children to become followers of Jesus. They're going to be followers of whatever it is that you prioritize over your family's connection with God's family. The second thing that's really important to realize as we wield this arrow and we aim it at the target, at the bullseye, is that we have to be facing the target ourselves, and we have to be firmly planted on solid ground in order to hit that target. Now, I'm not an archery expert. I'm not an bows and arrows kind of guy, but I watch it on TV. Any of you see the show The Hunt on History Channel? Anybody watch that? Awesome show, okay? Awesome show. Guys going up into Alaska hunting Kodiak bears. These things are huge, like 9 feet to 12 feet tall. They're monsters. The most ferocious land animal on the planet. Carnivores. They'll eat people like that. Every once in a while in the show, you'll see guys that are bow hunters that'll go after these Kodiak bears. Now, in order for a bow hunter to take down a Kodiak bear with his bow and arrow, he has to be within 30 meters of the bear to hit this one little spot about 8 inches high between the thorax and the heart. They've got to be 30 meters. A Kodiak bear can cover 30 meters in about 4 seconds. So this is dangerously close. But it's awesome watching these hunters pursue the bear, get as close to the bear as they can, and then when they take aim and fire, they're on stable ground. They're trying to be as steady and as still as they possibly can. Now, if we're going to aim our children at the right target, at the bullseye, at Jesus, number one, we've got to be pursuing the same thing. We've got to be getting as close to it as we can, as close to Jesus in our own lives as we can. And we've got to be on stable ground. We've got to have our feet firmly planted in God's word, in God's family. We can't be wavering all over the place. We've got to be firmly planted, and we've got to be facing the target ourselves. Now, the last thing you got to remember in hitting that target is that before that arrow can hit the target, you have to release the arrow. The arrow can never hit the target if it's not released. In our culture today, we have this pervasive thing happening where children live with their parents for longer and longer in life, well into adulthood. You know, in some cases, it's a necessity. But in many cases, it's just a simple matter of kids have grown dependent on their parents, and parents are having a tough time letting go of their kids and encouraging them to grow up and be all that God has designed them to be. And it's not healthy for either party. If you really want the arrow to hit the target, you've got to release the arrow. Now, just because you've gotten close yourself and you've pointed at the right target and you've released that arrow, there's no guarantee that that arrow hits that target. Let's be crystally clear about that. There's no guarantee, because you know what? The winds of life can come up and blow that arrow off target. I've seen it happen on the show. These guys get like 28 meters to this stinking bear and have like this close range shot, and the last second, the big Alaskan wind comes and whoosh, blows that arrow offline and they miss the bear, right? Sometimes that happens. Sometimes the winds of our culture blow our arrows, our children off target. Sometimes there are imperfections in that shaft that cause that arrow to waver. Our children are imperfect. They're sinners too. But they have a far better chance of hitting that target when we're doing our part. We can't use their imperfections and the winds of the culture as an excuse to not do our part in getting as close to the target as we can ourselves, standing on stable ground, pointing them at that bullseye, and giving them every chance possible to engage in a relationship with God through Jesus. Most people don't know this about me, but I don't think my wife knows this. One of my favorite foods in the world to eat is chicken McNuggets. Not the kind that you get at the Safeway freezer section or Burger King or Wendy's. I'm talking McDonald's chicken McNuggets. I love those things. I used to be able to eat like a 20-pack of those things in like 10 minutes. The mustard sauce was awesome. I think the new boxes of 20 say like share on the top. No way, all mine, right? Now, I'll be honest with you, over the last 5 or 6 years since I've been eating healthier and cleaner, I haven't eaten McDonald's chicken McNuggets very often. It's a rare occasion that I do. Every once in a while I'll get a craving for them, or we'll be out at a sporting event or something, and McDonald's is the only thing to choose from, so we'll go there and I'll get those chicken McNuggets. And you know what? The idea of the chicken McNuggets is pretty awesome. And then I get them, and I start eating them, and all of a sudden I remember, I don't really like these things that much anymore. I used to love them, but now they make me feel a little sick. They put a bad taste in my mouth. And then I hang on to that for a while until the next time I find myself at McDonald's, and then I do it again, right? This is what happens when we eliminate stuff from our diet, from our intake, that's icky, sticky, yucky stuff, and we replace it with stuff that's better for us. It may seem impossible, it may seem very unlikely, but I assure you, if you began to wean some of that stuff out of your life, that entertainment stuff that is the icky, sticky, gross stuff that's not very good for you, if you began to eliminate some of that from your life and you began to replace it with living water, with the stuff that Jesus gives, with the stuff that God gives, eventually, this stuff is not going to taste so good. In fact, when you do consume it, it's going to make you feel a little icky. It might make you feel a little sick. The same thing is true for our kids. If we manage what our kids are absorbing in their media, their entertainment, the more of this we can give them. Listen, there's no guarantee that they're not going to try this stuff. The world is pushing this at a much harder rate than we can ever push this stuff. But if we can help them as their parents see that this stuff, the living water, is what really fulfills. That's what really makes us feel hopeful and joyful and is life-changing. Then when they do go and they start experiencing this, when they do go out in the world and they start tasting that stuff that isn't so good for them, eventually, Lord willing, they'll recognize that it's not fulfilling. But they will have experienced enough under your leadership and under your guidance to know that there is something that is far more refreshing and far more fulfilling. And that's this relationship that God offers us through Jesus Christ. I'm going to close this morning with a prayer. I'm going to ask you to stand up. This is a prayer that Paul the Apostle prayed to God over the church in Rome. And I want this to be your prayer today as you leave. The words are here on the screen. I pray that God, the source of hope, will fill you completely with joy and peace because you trust in him. Then you will overflow with confident hope through the power of the Holy Spirit.